few years back, I did a story about John Bassel, a criminal who managed to escape from prison several times, only to be recaptured just a few days after his escape. There's a whole theory about this. A lot of people think he was purposely allowing himself to be recaptured, including me. But I'm not going to ruin it for you. There's a link below. The story is called The Escape Artist. I think you will enjoy it. But it got me thinking about three men that, unlike John Bassel, escaped from a prison known as Alcatraz and were never caught. Now, these three men were not necessarily hardened criminals. I suppose you could call them that if you liked, but they never really committed any truly heinous crimes. Not like murder or pedophilia or anything like that. They had committed robberies and money laundering, and I suppose their problem was that they just liked money a lot. Um, and that can get quite a lot of people into trouble. But Frank Morris was considered the ringleader of these three men, which consisted also of the Anglin brothers, and also Alan West, who we'll talk about a little bit in this story. But Frank Morris was rather a genius, or at least considered so in the criminal underworld. He had escaped actually from prison several times before his arrival at Alcatraz. And he immediately began devising a scheme on how to escape, but of course this was the prison no human being had escaped. But they were going to give it a try. They began by stealing things, just odd little pieces here and there. The first thing they stole was some parts from a vacuum, which the three men used to create a drill. And they drilled through their walls, and then they built themselves a little fake wall, and they would do this every night. Now, in order for them not to be heard, they would wait for music hour, which was something Alcatraz had started doing with their reputation for being hardened, just to give the criminals something to do each night. This was actually perfect for them, as the the four men, were able to work on drilling through the walls and getting out of the prison while everyone else was playing their music. Maybe music was in some ways their saving grace. Maybe not in the way that it would be for most normal people. But their next step was fooling the guards into thinking that they were still asleep in their beds each night, since the guards would pass by every now and then. So they made themselves some plastered heads, and put some hair from the barber shop on it. And each night the guards would look through, and it seemed to fool them. They would think that the four men were still asleep in their bed. Then the four men began to create a way to get across the bay, because Alcatraz, if you don't know, is surrounded by the San Francisco Bay on all sides. So, using some raincoats and some cleaning equipment, they made a makeshift raft and some paddles. And they waited very patiently, just digging away, until finally June 11th arrived. And at the hour, they began their escape. Now, one of the men was not able to get out, as he had used, and this was actually Alan West, the man that if I remember telling you, was not going to be as important to the story. He tried to get out, but realized the cement that he had put to stop from his wall from crumbling had set, and he couldn't get out until much later when the three men were gone. But anyways, the three men began to go up and through their little tunnel, and finally they climbed up some pipes and were managed to get out through the fan. And they started off, and they managed to escape using a blind spot on Alcatraz where the guards wouldn't be able to see them. And then they went into the bay, and from there the story is lost to us. Now, there's a lot of theories about what happened to them. The FBI's conclusion is that the three men died on the lake, that they could never have survived the temperatures, and that chances were they probably drowned. The Fireside's Tale's conclusion is that they survived. At least that's what our organization believes. If they had died, you would think that their bodies would have floated up onto the bay, and it wouldn't have been impossible for them to make it across the lake, and the Anglin brothers were known for being very good swimmers. But what happened to the three men is rather a mystery. There's reports that they went off to Brazil and were living there, and there's reports that they even kept in touch with their family, One of the mothers said she got flowers from her son every year, or at least she believed it was her son. And another, the Anglin family reported getting phone calls, which there would just be silence at the other end, although these could be pranks. The investigation is still open, but I suppose that, I believe, at least, that they escaped. I have every reason to believe. But, I did have an important announcement to make before we end off, and that is that I've decided to change the Fireside Tales a little bit. My dream here always was to create a show. That was my little pipe dream, to actually have maybe at least a few actors aside of myself, and also just a little bit of actual writing involved where I'd work for some time on a script instead of just improvising from history. But I don't think I'm going to be able to do that because making sketch episodes alone is almost impossible. I don't know if you all know that, but it's very difficult to make the sketch episodes, which I sometimes create when I'm able to. But I am going to try to make some changes to the Fireside Tales that I hope will make the show more enjoyable, but you'll just have to wait and see about what those are. But in the meantime, well, I hope your next escape is successful. And if the three men are out there, I want them to know that although they may be very hardened criminals and I probably shouldn't root for them, well, I hope they manage to continue to escape. What can I say? I'm a sucker for a good adventure story and a happy ending. And as always, good night.